Hey folks, so you know why we're here. Let's talk about some stinkers that I read this past year. First, to start off with, opinions are like nipples, everyone has them. I'm sorry, I guess, if I end up hating on a book that you really liked, but they ultimately were not for me. This is not to say that any of these were inherently bad. Well, maybe the ones near the top of the list are bad, or not really bad, but there are aspects of them that are bad. They ultimately, they just did not work for me, whether because of characters, plot, the style of the writing, maybe the ending. Just something did not work at all. So first up, I have honorable mentions. I have to just briefly mention the books that I DNF'd this year. I guess technically they don't really they both belong but don't belong on this list. They don't really belong because I didn't actually stick around to see how they ended. So it's not fair to call them the worst, but then again, I couldn't be arsed to stick around to finish reading them, so then they do still sort of fit on my list. So it's, yeah, we're just going to talk about the DNF'd ones first. So the books I DNF'd this past year were as follows. The Resurrection Man by Charlotte MacLeod. It was just really tedious. The writing style came across as boring and kind of pretentious, and I couldn't be bothered. Another one was A Guide to Haunted New England. This is by Thomas D'Agostino. It had a really shitty way of wording the history of the area. The way it was worded, it made it really sound like the word choices that this author used were purposefully vilifying the Native American tribes of the area while excusing or trying to make, like, you know, the same mass genocide of these tribes by settlers to just not be a big deal. And that's disgusting, so no thank you. I also DNF'd Godmother by Carolyn Turgeon. That is one that was definitely not for me. There was some imagery that I found particularly distasteful in there, and I also did not like the protagonist. I did not enjoy her. I did not enjoy her narration. And, you know, if I don't like a protagonist, I have a hard time slogging through the rest of the story, and I just, you know, I was grossed out, so I stopped reading. The Desperate Disturbance of Donald Godfrey Dawn by Nicholas Leonard and The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson are similar enough in why I decided to stop reading. They seemed like they were okay enough stories, but they were both not my cup of tea. Not writing styles that I enjoyed, and not the kind of fantasy that I really wanted, so I abandoned both of them. So this year I ended up picking out my top worst books of the year. There are 10 of them, is what I gave myself. None of these are 1 or 2 star reads. They are all, I think all of them are 3-star reads, although honestly there were a couple that I pondered if I should put it to 2 stars, but then I thought maybe I was being unnecessarily harsh. I don't know, but currently all of these are 3-star reads. So we'll go from the least of the worst to the absolute shit, I guess. So number 10 is The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie by Alan Bradley. This one maybe sounds surprising to be on here, since I did mention in my review back when I read this that I enjoyed the overall mystery, and I like that the protagonist is an 11-year-old budding chemist with an interest in poisons. While that is true, there are other parts of this book that made it so it is featured on this list. One point is the blatant racism. This is set in 1950, 1950 in England. So there's like a history of colonialism in Britain with Britain in general. That was really alluded to several times in the book, which I mean was not great, but I could have let some things about a little bit of bigotry slide, since it's given a common perspective of the time period, if it was like doing something with the plot or giving context to like the plot or the characters or whatever. But this instance of like this colonialism combined with a magical act that takes place, and it's not even something that has currently taking place in the book. It is a flashback scene in which a magical act where a highly stereotyped caricature of an Asian man was like a very detailed highlight of this act. That was just too much. You know, if it, like I said, if it did anything to give context to the like setting or the plot, what's going on, I mean, it would not be great, but it would be like an understandable usage of that bigotry, I suppose. But it did nothing to further the plot, add to the story, give us any details about the characters other than they suck. It was just kind of gross details that we got for unknown reasons, and I'm having a hard time really believing that the author's editor didn't like approach the author and be like, are we sure that this is necessary? Are we sure that this is something that you can't just like not have in the final version of this book, sir? Flavia herself was interesting, but by the end of this story, I was pretty much certain that she's a complete sociopath, and I didn't really care if she got out of danger or not. So the racism and Flavia's own lack of empathy and compassion just made me not really like this at the end of the day, and it was disappointing. Next on the list is The Night Sister by Jennifer McMahon. So this is another case of the book not necessarily being a terrible book, but for me, it was not an enjoyable time reading. I disliked most of the characters. I didn't mind Margot, but her perspective was not one that we really got a lot of in this book. But I did not give a crap about Piper or Rose. I hated Sylvie and Amy, and Jason is a creep. He's legitimately a stalker, and every time that he had a perspective in here or he was mentioned, I just got mad. I don't know what this book is. Like, I have no freaking clue what the hell this book was supposed to be. Is it a family drama? Is it a mystery? Is it a horror? Is it a dark fantasy? I have no damn clue. Like, I still, reflecting on this a couple of months after having read it, I still have no idea what the hell this book is supposed to be. And I can tell you, however, that it is not, as one of the reviews on the back says, something that talks about forgiveness and unconditional love. I saw no forgiveness or unconditional love in this book at all, so I don't know what the hell they're talking about. It was because of this lack of direction, I guess, into whatever this was supposed to be that made me really confused overall while reading this, and led me to ultimately disliking this book and just not enjoying the experience at all. I'm not sure if this was like this because the author wanted this book to be a grab bag of genres, or if she just writes in this convoluted yet vague manner. So I really don't know if I will read any of her writing again, just because I've heard people say that one of her other books is much better than this, but I don't know. I don't know if it's just how confusing this was, and that's just what this book is like, or if she just writes like this in general. Because if this is how she writes, then I don't want to read any of her other books, because it's just going to be a slog. And besides, like, every other aspect of this that I didn't really enjoy. It also was not scary. Like, this sounded like it was supposed to be really scary. It was not at all. So, that was an ultimate letdown, and I almost kind of wish that I DNF'd it instead of read it all the way through. Number 8 is Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. So I did almost place this lower on the list, like at 9 or 10, but the ending bothers me so much that that's why it's a little bit higher on the list. If you don't want a spoiler, skip ahead to me holding the book up again. I'm going to put it down. So when you skip ahead and you see me put my hand with the book back up again, that means the spoiler is done. Alright. So this is about two sisters, Eleanor and Marianne, and basically love matches, or, you know, shit that's going on with their family and trying to find love matches, you know, because it's the Regency period. Marianne ends up at the end of the book coupled with Colonel Brandon. For context, Marianne is, I believe, about 16 or 17 at the end of novel, and the Colonel is over 30. I don't remember, like, the exact age, but I think he is in fact over 35. So, you know, that's just gross. I get that this is a different time period, and that might have been more acceptable socially at the time. But at no time in history, I know it's socially acceptable, but honestly, at no time in history should a grown-ass man have been lusting after marrying and boning a child, because that is what a 16 or 17-year-old is. They are still a child. So, yeah, did not like that. That upset me. I also felt like Marianne was just kind of settling for an older man. Like, she just kind of gave up and was like, yeah, okay, I guess we'll be a match and eventually I'll fall in love. And it sounded like it was worded that way, that she just settled for it and eventually she came to love him. And it's like, ugh, that sucks. Anyway. Alright, so besides like that, something else that really bothered me throughout the book was Marianne. I did not like her at all. I found her to be Lydia 2.0, if you know Pride and Prejudice. She just reminded me so much of Lydia, and since I loathe Lydia almost as much as I loathe Wickham and Lady Catherine, you can imagine how I felt about Marianne. She is just supremely immature, self-centered, flighty, overly dramatic, and just really plain naive and kind of stupid. And she's like the worst bits of being a teenager all rolled into one. Their mother is an enabler, just kind of like just louse shit, says, oh yeah dear, let's do this. Their brother and his wife and that extended branch of the family are legitimately terrible people. And I really cannot believe that Eleanor is like stuck with these assholes for her whole life. Like, that's just, I can't believe it. It's like, girl, run. Number 7 is Pride by Ibiza Boy. So, this is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice. While there were points of the book that I did like, I enjoyed the bits of poetry that were throughout. I loved her tight-knit family and like Zuri, that's the main character. I loved her tight-knit family, and I really liked the discussion that was kind of started on gentrification and what the cost to the community actually is. But at the end of the day, there was just so much more that I hated about the book. Zuri sucks. I'm just gonna say that. First and foremost, she is a terrible person. She is overly possessive of her older sister, Janae, who, guess what, is allowed to have a life that does not include her family, especially her annoying little sister. Like, she's allowed to have her own fucking life, friends, things that she wants to do in the world. She doesn't have to involve her pushy sister, like, in anything. She's an adult. Zuri is also downright nasty to the Darcy brothers who move in across the way, especially Ainsley, who is only ever like nice and polite to like her and everyone and really likes her sister, and she's just like straight up rude. And when she's not being like nasty to people or monopolizing her sister Janae's time, she's just so judgmental about everyone and everything that is not involved in her immediate neighborhood. And I know that it's a retelling on Pride and Prejudice, and I know that she's the prejudice part of it, but like, it just felt like it was laying it on really thick. I think it's, you know, a good thing to have a flawed main character, but I don't think that is a wise decision to have a main character that is so entirely unlikable. Because some people can put up with reading about a character that is incredibly unlikable, and then there's others like me who does not want this asshole to get a happy ending because they are so awful. So it was just, it ended up being incredibly exhausting to read this because Zuri is the narrator of the story. I also thought that there was kind of a missed opportunity with Darius, who is like the stand-in for Fitzwilliam Darcy in this take. I thought that he was a bit 2D as a character. He could have been fleshed out more. I know the perspective is from Zuri's point of view, so there's not that much you can do with it, but I felt like he could have been slightly more animated of a person. And I really wish that his feelings of not fitting in anywhere, whether it be between the more diverse parts of the hood or the rich white prep school that community that he attends, and his feelings of like he's not white but he's not black enough, but it's like this not really belonging anywhere. I felt like that could have been expanded upon a little more. And another point for disliking Zuri is the fact that she did not seem to actually listen to him or understand his feelings at all, because she's selfish and all she cares about is how things fucking affect her life. And she's just I have in my notes here, I wrote Miss Judgy Judge McJerkface. So that's pretty much the summation of Zuri. And yeah, overall I'm really tired of Pride and Prejudice retellings just ultimately being kind of a disappointment. The premise of this sounded so good, but the execution was severely lacking. So number 6 is actually 3 books in a series. It is 3 books in the Anne series by Ellen Montgomery. These are books 5, 6, and 7. So first up, we're going to go with book 5, Anne's House of Dreams. It started out good with like the wedding. I'm hoping at this point, because of how popular Anne of Green Gables is and of how popular Anne with an E is, that all of you know she ends up with Gilbert. Okay. It's obvious. It's fine. Their wedding is nice. There's some romantic bits in here that are very sweet. Like, that was cool. But as soon as they hit their, like, House of Dreams and they arrived, things became kind of lackluster for me, which is a shame because there were some new characters, like friends that they made by their new home that, you know, are very interesting characters, and I really liked them. And they were, like, the best parts of the novel. Otherwise, it just was not hitting the same places for me, I guess, as the other books. It didn't feel quite as charming. Part of that was because Gilbert takes on some attitudes about what women, or I guess what his wife should do with her life now, and I was just very disappointed in him, like a very bad book boyfriend. Very, very bad boy. I also really disliked that Anne's dreams become so, like, narrow. She had so many things that she wanted to do, and we just read, like, we spent, like, the past 4 books, right, reading about her hopes and dreams. And sure, she hoped for love and like family at some point, but she also had so many hopes and dreams about writing and teaching children and doing different things. And then all of a sudden, it was like a switch went off when their vows were spoken, and suddenly the only thing she cares about is popping out babies and being like the perfect wife and homemaker. And I know that this is a different time period, and this is just what women had to do, essentially. Like, it's almost like your value both decreases and yet increases because now you've had children, so you have a purpose, but like you as a separate entity from your children and husband is like null. It just, it really felt like she was settling. It almost felt like she was a different person, which was sad. Anne of Ingleside was much the same. It's almost like Anne was given a lobotomy or something. She was completely a different person. Towards the end of the book, there were a couple of scenes in which the old Anne kind of peeked through a little bit, but most of the time she was just this utterly different person. I know that being a mother like changes you, but it shouldn't make you, again, do a completely like 180 on your own personality. I also kind of disliked that the children were the focus of this novel, to be honest. The children, I disliked all of the kids. I found them to be incredibly annoying. I hated that they referred to Anne as Mother Dear Wums. Like, Dear Wums. Like, even saying it makes me feel gross. My main objection with this, I think, overall, is how incredibly saccharine everything was. Like, the other books felt very sweet and heartwarming and wholesome, but as soon as, like, let's say 6 and 7 happens, they seem like super saccharine, and this book was basically the equivalent of a Leave It to Beaver canned laugh track. And then with book 7, Rainbow Valley was also, like I said, very saccharine. This is also having to do with her 6 kids, but the main focus of this is actually on their friends and nearby neighbors, 4 children of the new minister. While I did like the minister's kids more than the Blythe children, I just ultimately did not really enjoy this one either. For such a thin little book, it felt like a slog to get through it because I was so bored. Really, I just can't really see myself rereading any of these 3 in the series again. Like, they ultimately were a disappointment. Alright, then for book number 5 was Dead Sleep by Greg Iles. So, speaking of disappointments, I was expecting a little bit more from this than what I got. So this is a mystery thriller. It has like creepy art photos of naked women that are probably dead. It involves missing women, a serial killer. So while it does involve those things, and that's what I was expecting, I felt like there was a lot of extra nonsense that was kind of added in. It was good to have the main character be more fleshed out, but honestly, her purpose in the case, like being involved in it, was completely unbelievable. I mean, she's a famous photojournalist, the daughter of a famous photojournalist, who went missing years ago. She's the twin sister of a possible victim. Okay, I get it. But to have the FBI pull her into an active case, especially an active serial killer case in which, again, her sister was the victim, it just, it strikes me as kind of improbable. Like, is that something that would happen? I could see her being like a consultant or something like that, but having her directly involved and directly being like in it, just, I get what the author was trying to go for. Like, the FBI would try to use her to, like, set a trap, but it also just seemed highly unlikely that they would be given the okay to do something like that. And again, I mean, it was good that she was kind of fleshed out as a character, but it also felt like a situation where men don't really know how to write women, which is a shame, because I know that there are men out there that can write women. It is possible, but it was not possible this time, apparently. I also had a problem with, first of all, the serial killer being who it was. It felt like there might be some underlying nastiness behind it. I'm gonna keep it vague because I don't want to spoil anything in case this is something that you want to read, but I'll just say that I might be reading too much into the circumstances of it, but it did leave a sour taste in my mouth, so yeah. Another issue was how Asians of the world are talked about. This heavily references the Vietnam War because the main character, Jordan's dad, became a famous photojournalist during the Vietnam War, and he disappeared towards the end of it. So I guess it does make sense for the events overseas to be brought up and things to be involved because there's some stuff going on there. But the way Chinese businessmen are talked about, for reasons I can't fully fathom, the way they were talked about and referred to in here, and the way that Vietnamese were also referred to, I just felt really uncomfortable for the majority of this novel. I'm having a hard time telling if these were actually microaggressions and really shitty, or if these are details meant to further the plot. It certainly didn't feel like it was adding any context to anything besides making it kind of sound like the author's a little bit prejudiced. But again, this is the first book I've read of Greg Iles, and I feel like, at least from some digging I did on Goodreads, it kind of feels like I seem to be in the minority of people who thought that language choices were a problem. So, I don't know. I might be thinking too much about it, but it was something that made me really uncomfortable and not okay with this book in general. So this book was another disappointment. I was so hyped for this story. Like, I was super hyped. The concept of it, like, a girl who lives in the Museum of Ancient Indian Art and Culture that her mom curates, and she stretches the truth a lot at school to fit in with her rich classmates, and then ends up trying to impress them and accidentally unleashes like an ancient evil. Concept sounds super cool, you know, stuff you gotta fix, etc. That sounded so good. The execution of it was not. I feel like it didn't do it so well. Besides the fact that the author took characters, or like subjects, from an active religion and kind of made them her own. I have read a little bit more about that, and it does seem like that kind of offended some people that are involved in that religion. So that's, first of all, not really great. Second of all, the writing of it just felt kind of weak to me overall. Part of that was the humor in the book. I said in my past review of it, in fact I think I've bitched about this a couple of times, but I admit that the problem that I have with the humor might be due to the fact that I am not the target audience for this. This is for a younger audience. So that might be it, but still, at the end of the day, the humor felt extremely forced. And over the top, and resembled more like a TV script for a kids comedy rather than a fleshed out novel. I compared it before to an episode of Sweet Life of Zack and Cody or iCarly, and I stand by that. That is the sense of humor that's in here, and I really don't think it's a sense of humor for everyone. And I think at the end of the day, I personally don't think it works well for comedy, but people seem to enjoy it, so I guess it works well for like a television comedy, but in a novel it just does not. It feels weak. I also felt like the ending was not particularly well done. The climax had already happened, and that was pretty good, and I think that would have been like the perfect place to stop. But the story kept going. And there's also, I guess that would have been fine if it were not for the fact that there's also like a sneak peek at the back of the book to book 2. And that sneak peek in book 2 is also recounting and continuing on with the events of this drawn out ending of this book, and it was obviously not needed. If you're just going to put it at the beginning of book 2, why the hell did you put it at the end of book 1 when you could have just ended right after the climax? That was just honestly really poor editing. So yeah, this was a major disappointment. Number 3 was The Missing Chums by Franklin W. Dixon. So I'm going to preface this by saying that I did not exactly go into this book with high expectations, since, to be honest, I've always preferred Nancy Drew to Harry Boys. So even though I wasn't like disappointed by this book, I was still overall annoyed with myself for not DNFing it. From, again, completely saccharine characters to baddies with flimsy personalities and motives, to the brothers BFF Chet being like the most annoying person in the book. It was a slog to get through this, and this is a children's book. It is not that long of a book at all. The action I felt was poorly done, and it just felt like it was there for the hell of it, because it's a book for boys, so we gotta get some muscle flexing and danger, we're men. Ooh, gotta have some violence and some guns, obviously. Also, the fat phobia in here is terrible, and this is something that I've really noticed in my reading of first editions of Nancy Drew books as well, especially where Nancy's friend George is just incredibly mean to her cousin Bess. Just really bad. Well, in this friend group of complete and utter chuckleheads, we have everyone else, and also kind of Frank and Joe Hardy as well, but mostly their other like large group of friends, just picking on Chet the whole time, being like incredibly awful and playing pranks on him like all the time because he's overweight. And it's like, look, he is annoying. Like I did say a minute ago that he is the most annoying character in the book, and that stands true. But that still doesn't mean that it's okay to be totally fatphobic to him. It's really not. It's gross, and I hate that this was used for laughs back in the day. I mean, no wonder boomers think that bullying sometimes is just a funny haha joke that they're doing. I gotta refuel. So, number 2 is Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm by Kate Douglas Wiggin. So part of my disappointment with this book might be due to the fact that I read both Anne of Green Gables and like The Secret Garden before I got around to reading this. So my expectations were pretty high already for another book about a young girl leaving her home to move out with relatives in the country or be more out in like nature and just move in with relatives, be somewhere in a different setting than they started out with. But let's chat for a second about the difference between Canadian and English stories about young girls doing that and American books where they do the same thing. This was the preachiest out of the bunch. So there are parts in both Sacred Garden and Anne of Green Gables where there is clearly some type of message that was also supposed to be imparted to the young, well, at the time, I think they were only expecting young girls to read this, so young girls, that they were trying to impart onto them. But this was just incredibly beyond just trying to impart a little bit of wisdom. This felt like this book was, its entire purpose was to be a moralistic messaging to young girls rather than a story that they are just meant to enjoy. So that was like strike one for me for this book, was that like preachy ass message. The characters were also not something that I enjoyed. I thought that Rebecca was such a major Mary Sue that I did not enjoy any aspect of her, and I particularly disliked that there was zero character growth for her Aunt Miranda. She was the same awful, stuck-up, unbending bitch all the way through from the beginning to the end of the book. The potential romance in here that's kind of like, it's like a budding romance type thing that's kind of started near the end of the book, takes place between Rebecca and a grown-ass man who had watched her grow up. So she's like an older teen at this point. I think she might be 17 or 18, possibly. I can't, it's been a while since I've read this, so I can't remember how old she's supposed to be at the end of the novel, but like, still, she's still a minor and you're still a grown-ass man, and you have been thinking creepy things about her since you met her as like a 10-year-old, and that's just pretty rank, and I don't appreciate it. If you yourself want to experience this story, I would highly suggest you watch the Shirley Temple movie, which is the version that is in here. Like, all the photos in here are from the Shirley Temple movie. That version has music in it. Shirley Temple's in it. There's a lot of other actors and actresses in it, and I know that they were pretty famous at the time. I don't remember any of their names, but yeah, they're all in it, and it's a musical, and it also has the bare minimum of the original tale in it, and that is why the movie is far superior to this, because it's just trash overall. And yeah, just watch the movie. It's a lot better. And lastly, top of the list, number 1 is Bed of Roses by Nora Roberts. So it pains me to put one of her books on another like worst books list, but this had me raging. Overall, I like the series. It follows 4 childhood friends through a year of finding love while they are giving their all to their joint like wedding planning business. I really like the humor. Like, Nora Roberts is really good at writing humor and like fun banter between characters, and I enjoyed that. And I also really liked the like behind the scenes aspect to this, because I find the wedding planning business to be, I mean, I give kudos to anyone who's in it because it seems highly stressful, but it was also very interesting to see the behind the scenes to that business aspect, and I thought that was fun. I thought that was well done. However, there are some attitudes about and involving love and coupling that I'm not completely on board with. While I did like the love stories in book 1 and 4 of the series, book 3 I was a little iffy on, mainly on the love interest because he's kind of an ass. And this book, book 2, So I went from being kind of okay with the main character, Emma, who is the florist of the group. I went from being okay with her coming in from book 1 and also the beginning part of this book to like loathing her entirely at the end of the book. There's going to be a spoiler right here because there's no way I can talk about this without mentioning it. So if you're okay with that, let's keep going. If not, I'll see you in the next video. Okay, so spoilers. Emma and her love interest. She is with Jack, who is a friend of them all. They have only been a thing for a couple of months. They haven't really even officially defined their relationship since Emma is taking it slow since she knows that the love interest, Jack, has a slight commitment issue. I.e. he's a little nervous due to the fact that his parents had a shitty divorce, which, okay, you know, that's valid. That is valid that he's a little gun shy, it's fine. Then Emma decides that she is going to gain access to his house by, she like gets the keys from somebody else. He did not give her keys. Like she gets his spare keys from, I think, his work or something like that. So she decides she's going to gain access to his house to surprise him with a nice meal. So her and Jack are sleeping together. They are together, basically, but they're not living together. Like, that's an important distinction. They are not living together. They have not, like, discussed living together, you know. So he had a terrible day, and he wants to come home and relax and be alone. She is in his house when he arrives. As someone who prefers being alone after a really bad day, so I can just decompress, or like just hide somewhere so I can try to decompress, because sometimes you have a really bad day and it feels like you're just gonna blow up. Like, I understand this desire to just not see other human beings for 24 hours, or 10 hours probably, so you can sleep and then get up the next morning. Yeah, okay. But since Emma's world is like complete sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns farting glitter, she does not understand like this desire at all. She doesn't get that maybe he wants to be alone for the evening to get over his rotten headache and terrible mood. So I had to point out, it's not like he's exactly welcoming her with a freaking marching band, but at the same time he's not outright nasty to her or anything. He is clearly kind of in a grumbly mood. He does one unforgivable thing, apparently, and that was while they were talking and he was just like, oh, how'd you get in? Because, again, it's a valid question. How the fuck did you get into my place? I didn't give you a key. And just like talking to him, they're talking, and he just kind of absentmindedly takes the spare key and shoves it in his pocket because, you know, he's thinking, oh, gotta put that back in the office or something. Alright, that's it. That's what he does. And that is the thing that makes her turn into a hurricane of a total psycho. She screams at him, berates him, does not allow him to, like, say any words, or try to be like, hey, hold up, wait a second. Does not stop for a second so, you know, they can have a dialogue like rational grown-ups usually do. Like, or at least rational grown-ups who are in an adult relationship do. And after she is done screaming, him storms out and then runs back to her friends where she acts like someone just ran over her grandma or something. Legitimate. She is sobbing, she is holding herself and rocking dramatically while all of her friends, upon hearing the explanation, go into full warrior mode, ready to skin this dude alive. Like, I'm not even kidding. They just all coddle her, they kiss her wounds, call her baby, tell her they're so sorry. And I mean, I cannot believe in a group of 4 rational, grown-ass, kick-ass businesswomen that not a one had a moment where they sat back and said, Em, cut the bullshit, you're acting like a damn fool. Like, that's, like, this just coddling, stuff right here and telling her they're so sorry and no one's ever gonna hurt her poor baby face again. Like, that's not how friends work. I mean, yes, you support your friends. You take care of them when they are down. You try to pick them up. You try to make them feel better. You comfort them. But at the same time, you also care enough about your friends to tell them when they are acting like an asshole. And she was clearly acting like an asshole, and not a single one of them thought that any of them should play devil's advocate for even a second and just be like, hold up, repeat this again when you stopped crying, and just keep repeating it until you understand that maybe you overreacted. Just like, this is not how women should work. This is not how we uphold our sisters, by allowing piss poor behavior and making men grovel just so we can get our way exactly. Like, that's not how we show people having healthy communicative relationships. This is incredibly toxic, and I cannot believe that this book, from reviews that I have seen, I mean, not all reviews, there's a lot of people that felt like I do, but from what I've seen in some of the reviews, that this is looked upon as a favorable addition to this series, I really don't understand, because what I saw was a childish, immature brat freaking out, her friends babying her, and then a guy who knew that he kind of messed up but didn't quite understand what the hell was going on, was not given a chance to understand what the hell was going on, and then had to grovel at her feet basically and get out of his comfort zone ahead of what he was not really fully okay with. Like, his boundaries were still closed, and by her acting like this, he had to, like, disregarding where his boundaries were in the relationship at all. And it just really bothered me. Like, I felt like this is such a terrible message to be sending to people about relationships entirely. Like, this is not how you behave. This is this prime example, numero uno, of how you're not supposed to behave. Like, it's just absolutely horrible. And yeah, ultimately it made my reread of that series to be really disappointing. So that's it, guys. That is all of the books that I read in 2021 that I really did not like. I was trying so hard to not drop a lot of F-bombs while I was doing this. I'm trying to be more mindful of how many times I say it in like a video, and I know that I already screwed up for this one, so sorry about that, guys. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this. Again, if you like any of these books, sorry, but you know, you're a different person than I am. I didn't like these. I'm sure you probably don't like some books that I consider my favorite, so it's okay. It's how the world works. If you also did not like any of these books, or if there is anything that particularly made you rage that you read in 2021, let me know down below. Let me know how that went. Hopefully back to more positive video in the next one. Alright, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!